So this is my PowerPoint for the bias interview that we were supposed to do on, and I chose mental health to do my interview on. So to start off, this isn't my bias. I do believe and understand that the mental health surrounding isn't taken seriously enough because we have so many deaths per year. Like this number, that's equal to one death of suicide per 40 seconds. So it's not a good thing. And I do believe that because it is a new thing that everyone is now widely accepting, it does make it more difficult for people to accept it that are older, and that's not a bad thing. Like, I understand that they have their ways and we have our ways, and it's okay. And I do understand that that's why most people who are diagnosed with mental health issues are probably young teens or teens/young adults. So it's okay. The change is inevitable. Change is good. So, and then I also do have a mental health illness. I've had it for 7 years. My family still, unfortunately, doesn't believe in it / understand or why I can't just stop having it. So that's another thing of why I wanted to do my bias on mental health, just to see their perception of it. So then these are the questions that I found the most effective during the interview. So out of the 10 questions, I chose these ones. And so the first one is, what is your opinion on mental health and how it is affecting a wide variety of the world's population? And then number 4 is, what do you think the leading cause of mental health issues in teens/young adults is? And number 8, to your knowledge, has anyone in your family experienced or struggled with any mental health issues? If so, what were they diagnosed with and how did it affect your family member / family in general? So these questions will be answered / brought up throughout the whole PowerPoint. So I first started with my friends who are for the bias or see it and recognize it. I started with them because I felt like it would have been easier for me to start with people who I know aren't gonna have a hard time with the questions, if that makes sense in a way. So this was basically like my test run for the questions that I created. So I interviewed my 2 best friends. They have both been diagnosed with different and multiple mental illnesses, so they understand that it is very much real, and their opinion on it is that they both kind of had the same. I interviewed them separately so it wouldn't like influence one or another's answers, but they both pretty much are the same thing, where like their opinion is that it is a real thing, and they believe that there is no way to like say that it's not real. Like, they believe that people who think it's not real and you can just stop having mental health illnesses, or like, that's not okay. So and then I just listed some of the things that they have been diagnosed with. Again, they don't all have the same. So it's like bipolar, anxiety, depression, etc. And then for the second question that I thought was most useful was, they also both said that they don't believe there is just one reason for mental health illnesses, because that there is so many different different kinds of mental health illnesses, that they believe it's a concoction of different things. So like, for example, most people that I've heard have said that the reason for mental health illnesses like are on a rise is because of the internet, social media, that realm in general. So I asked that question to see how they felt on the topic, and they both again basically said the same thing, where they don't feel as there is one variable to the cause of mental health issues in teens and young adults, but it has to do with like many different things altogether. And then for the last thing that I found was in their family, they do believe that many of the adults slash family members have and suffer with mental health issues. They just don't know exactly because, again, they haven't been diagnosed and they won't go for help because they don't think they need it. And I understand why many adults do that, because they were raised differently. I do feel that mental health disorders and illnesses are a new topic still. Like, it didn't start coming around to the 2000s where many people started getting diagnosed with it and it was an acceptable thing to have. So I do understand why they said that. And then it was also brought up that in one of the interviews for The Bias that their members of their family that were close to them had also had some sort of mental illnesses that they have. So they do believe in the genetically passed down mental illnesses. So then for my next slide is against the biased. So these are two people that I chose in my family. So I chose my mom and my dad. That's also due to the corona. So we're on lockdown, so I couldn't really go to other family members. So I just chose my mom and my dad because I do know somewhat of their side for this bias. So it was easy for me to choose them. And I did do their interview separately, so no answers persuaded the others. So for my parents, they kind of both, again, said the same thing, which is an interesting thing that I found in this interview, that for the bias and against the bias, they both had similar answers. So both of my parents don't really agree with or support the idea of mental illnesses, such as the major ones that majority of the people who are diagnosed have, which is depression, anxiety, and those ones basically, because they believe it's just in their head, and that if they choose to feel that way, that it's their choice. They can stop it, or they can choose to not think those things. So that is their bias. The only thing that they do support or agree with that people get diagnosed with is the major, very bad mental health illnesses, such as schizophrenia or PTSD, but they only think PTSD is acceptable in a way if it's a war vet. So they think that I don't know how to explain that. So if someone fell off a ladder, let's say, and then they had PTSD to get back on the ladder, they would think that that's just in their head and they need to get over it because you're gonna fall no matter what. But people do have PTSD from trauma like that. So that's what I found for both of them. And then the other one was, they also don't believe that there is just one variable for mental health issues in teens and young adults. Like my friends, they also believe that it can be a number of things that affect a person. It's not just one specific thing that triggers array of illnesses. So that was a good thing that I saw both sides agreed on that at the same time. And then for the last question was, any family members had mental health illnesses? They said no. They are maybe that some might have something, but for the most part, they said no one has anything. But again, I think that is probably due to the fact that many people, how they were raised, don't see that as acceptable to be diagnosed with. So my next slide was how I felt the interviews went and what my experience was. So as I said, I did start with my friends because I felt like it would be easier, and it was to see how the questions played out. So that was good. It was interesting because I felt like with one of my friends and my mom, it felt like a real genuine conversation. Like we had just picked up this topic out of nowhere and just started talking about it nonchalant. And then for my other friend and my dad, it did kind of feel like a structured environment, I would say, because they weren't really like elaborating as much as my other friend and my mom would. They were just like sort of answering the questions and then like sort of getting into it, but that's okay. Like, I understand everyone has different preferences. And then lastly, it was also interesting to see their interpretations on the subject, because I understand everyone has different interpretations on everything because we all are different in our ways of thinking. But it was really interesting to see how two different sides kind of the same topic, of how if you're for the bias, I would say you have more understanding or sympathy in a way of people who suffer with mental health illnesses. And then if you're on the other side, it's kind of like the stigmatization of everything ruins your interpretation of it. And then for my last slide, I put is what I learned from this interview. So the number one thing that was most interesting and that I didn't put in the question slide because I wanted to make it a whole slide for itself was that the most common thing from all 4 interviews was how poorly the stigmatization around mental health ruins any chances of it being taken seriously as an actual illness, such as if it was like a flu that everyone can get. So that was the most common thing, is that even on the for the bias side, they were saying how they believe that there is always going to be a stigma and it will never go away because it is new and not many people believe in it. And then also another thing that goes with the stigmatization of it is that when people who are diagnosed or have a mental illness, if they use it as an excuse or an advantage to get something, this also tarnishes any chances of it being taken seriously. Because on Against the Bias, when I was interviewing them, both of them had bad stories for people using a mental health issue as an excuse or to get something. And when I heard that, it kind of made sense to me why there is such a big stigmatization around mental health, because yes, there are so many people that have it, but that few percentage of people that ruin it and use it as an excuse like that to get out of something, or like, yes, you can use it to like, if there is something seriously wrong, but if you're using it to like get an advantage over something or someone like that, like it just ruins it. And it's like, there's no way with all of that we're gonna be able to get it taken seriously enough. So that was interesting to find out that is something that occurred often, and why the Against the Bias side doesn't believe in it. And also another common thing in all 4 of the interviews was that many of the adult family members don't know if they have something, but they were pretty much sure that they probably did. Again, just because they didn't get diagnosed, or they won't go to get help, and they probably won't ever know. Which, I mean, you can take it either way, like it's a good or bad thing. Like, I'm sure most people would want to know, but then again, there's people who are like, if it's not my major concern, like, I'm okay, you know? So those were the main things that I found interesting, and this interview really taught me a lot, that there is always many sides to one story, and that you should always look at all of them. So yeah, that's my interview. Thank you.